my spun sugar.
You spoil your dinner.
Papa, we saw the Galapagos flood. Big waves came up and flooded the whole city. And when the water went back, it was all muddy and horrible, full of dead bodies.
Oh, Judy.
Oh, look, the light. There's never been anything like it in the whole world.
We don't have to come here on a train or stay in a hotel. It's right in our own hometown. Grandpa, they'll never tear it down, will they?
Well, they'd better not.
I can't believe it. Right here where we live.
Right here in St. Louis.
Now, when people think of American slavery, they don't think of the enslavement of Native Americans. Why is this?
Well, partly because the enslavement of Native Americans occurred first, and
Say that again, please. Say that again.
The enslavement of Native Americans really began before the enslavement of Africans, not only in the Caribbean by the Spanish, where it was extremely extensive. In the Caribbean, I might mention that the numbers were huge that were involved, and they had several kinds of slaves. They had the normal slave, but they also had people who were called, they were called Indians from the useless islands. They were from islands where there was no gold. And so they had the right to go and remove people from those islands.
The useless islands?
Yeah,
what
Jamaica, for example, would be a useless island because it had no gold. Inutiles, not useful. And they needed labor so badly on Haiti, where the gold was found, Haiti, and Cuba, that they were stealing people constantly and removing them by force from other islands. Even after it was no longer technically in the best or possible, legally even, to enslave, they still could remove them as forced free labor. We could call it later coolie labor, right? And then they had other categories of unfree Indians as well. But once the population declined on the islands themselves, they began raiding the north coast of Venezuela and Colombia very extensively, also part of Panama. They also came up here and cleaned out the Bahamas completely. All the Lucayo people.
What period are we talking about now?
Well, we're into the 1440s, 1540s, 1560s. Many people from Florida, South Carolina is raided for slaves, and also the west coast of Mexico in the 1530s. Many Mexican Indians are sold as slaves, and it extends on into a much later period of time. But in short, the tremendous numbers of Native Americans were enslaved, and the Spaniards kept looking farther and farther afield for slaves to replenish the labor supply. And part of that, of course, meant then that they turned to Africa. And particularly, in the early 1500s, they started bringing in a few African slaves, but they had some second thoughts because many of the Africans ran away and joined the native people. And there were major rebellions, particularly famous on the island of Haiti, led by an Indian chief named Enriquillo or Enriquez, who had Africans as well as Native Americans in his rebellion. There were a number of them, and so because of that, they held off for a little while. They thought the mixture was too dangerous. They were also very worried because some of the Africans, particularly from Senegal, were Muslims. And they didn't want Islam, they didn't want Judaism either, but they didn't want any foreign religion but Christianity spreading in the Americas.
You have said that one of the reasons that most of us don't think of Native Americans and we think of American slavery is that the enslavement of Native Americans was first. But are there other reasons?
I think partly because it's very difficult for the white newcomers to North America particularly to face up to the fact that this isn't just a little romantic set of interludes between knights that are jousting with each other. This is a materialistic and economic war. Not only a war for land, but a war for resources and a war for labor. And in many, many areas, Native Americans were reduced to poverty and forced to become workers and laborers on white people's ranches and so on, in addition to, in the earlier period, being enslaved. So that I think that the white population just wants to bury what they've done to the native people. They don't want to really know what they did and what they're still doing in some areas. I think that's one of the main factors.
Could you talk about how Europeans went about capturing Native Americans?
Well, it's not a happy thing, but it illustrates one of the kinds of great lessons that we as human beings have to learn. And that lesson is to be very astute and not allow ourselves to be used against our brothers and sisters. Not allow ourselves to be dupes and to be used in brutal ways against other human beings. Okay, often we don't simply have the information, and the Spaniards were often very direct and very brutal. They just went in and captured thousands of people and rounded them up and took them to market. But in other cases, the colonialists were much more clever. For example, the Portuguese conquered Brazil basically by Portuguese men intermarrying with native people, particularly powerful tribes living along the coast, powerful chieftains. And then, of course, Native Americans value their families very much. Kinship is extremely important. And so, without realizing it, now they've got a new member of the family. He doesn't have the same motives that they have, but there are kinship obligations by means of which this Portuguese guy gradually takes advantage of existing enmities that may exist between Indian groups, maybe some old hostilities, and uses then his relatives against other Indian groups. And pretty soon rewards them with guns and with other weapons and goods for capturing other human beings. And so it starts out small, but as time goes by, it becomes tremendously big operations.